Hello, everyone. I'm David Escudero from the Madrid School of Architecture of the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. I'm going to show an ongoing research that we are carrying out in the Cultural Landscape Research Group of the same university, a research project that is funded by the Madrid region and the European Social Fund. It explores how representation can contribute to create new layers of urban history through the case of Madrid. I will focus today on filmmaking, but the study is comprehensive and expands to all kinds of representation. Well, as we all know, big cities are often filmed and projected onto the big screen. Their urban landscapes are employed as backgrounds, but they often become a constituent of the scene. We see here some well-known examples of this. Rome in Roman Holiday, where Audrey Hepburn gets lost with Gregory Peck for a few days, or New York in Once Upon a Time in America, where it's depicted as the perfect scenery for mafia, corruption, and bad guys. Also, the London neighborhood Notting Hill, where Hugh Grant struggles with the city in search of love, and Tokyo in Lost in Translation, where noise and chaos become the rule of the city. Well, all of them, beyond their scenes, build the image of the city. That is, they unveil layers of the cities that are there, but thanks to them, they are visible. Rome's city life, New York's gangster environment, London's romantic quality, and Tokyo's crowds. Also, Madrid is an example of how the urban space of big cities can be used by films to support their message. Here we see, for example, how the emptiness of one of the busiest streets of Madrid echoes the loneliness of the character in Open Your Eyes. Or here, just depicting everyday life through the couple of grandmother and grandson finding a lizard in What Have I Done to Deserve This by Pedro Almodóvar. So, as a bidirectional phenomenon, once these scenes join the collective imagery, these urban spaces are charged with these images. And that's the very starting point of the ongoing research presented here, to study how representation of certain built environments becomes part of the imagery. It's no longer the space or the scene separately, but the scene in the space and the space affected by the projected image. We all remember that Paris of the Nouvelle Vague, romantic and introspective at the same time, that is on the screen right now. Or, as we saw before, the dangerous New York, and after the Second World War, depicted by several films, from all the film noir to Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, and many, many others. So the images conveyed by cinematography are together with the names of the cities and with the spaces they depict. Or, in other words, the urban space contains those images. This idea, of course, is not new. Some other representation of cities in its different formats have joined their imageries. One of the best examples, of course, is Nolly's map of Rome, but there are more like the psychogeographic map of Paris drawn by Guy Debord, or the map of signals in Las Vegas by Venturi and Scott Brown. Or the idea of city created by fragments in the map of Berlin by Ungers and Koolhaas, or this one of Tokyo that reconfigures some buildings of the city by Atelier Beauboy. Therefore, Las Vegas, Paris, Rome, Berlin, and Tokyo are also these images. In short, our approach to this topic is aligned with contemporary and consolidated academic works, such as those of Juliana Bruno. She explores cinematography as a medium capable of adding layers to the actual geography of the city. And as she stated, new images of the city are creatively generated in the arts, and the city itself is forced to interact closely with these visual representations, becoming to some extent the product of an artistic panorama. And also by Richard Koech, who noted that the built space can borrow qualities and characteristics of spaces and places comparable to those seen in film. That is, that certain qualities of filmic space can leave the screen and qualify or add meaning to real physical places. And that is It's exactly the starting point of this research and its conceptual base, exploring how representation can contribute both to add and reveal heritage values in the urban landscape within the Madrid region. That's a larger research, and I won't stop here on the whole, but at least I would like to mention that we are gathering and studying together different images coming from cinematography, painting, photography, literature, and other mediums captured during the 20th century. We have gathered around 500 images like these ones you see on the screen. The intention behind this material is twofold: to reflect on how it used Madrid as a scenery, and to discuss whether they could enable a deeper understanding of patterns of inhabitation, of post-occupancy, and of the material components of the urban environment. So I will focus today in film, but the paper will include our work about the other kind of representations, painting, photography, literature, and so on. And in film, we started by selecting more than 100 scenes that had been shot in Madrid. We decided to work with films released in the 20th century and to exclude documentaries. And perhaps the most important decision was to work with scenes rather than films. Designating the scene as a unit of study allows us to first isolate its content from the general plot of the movie, and second, focus attention on how that scene is adding meaning to the space. So here we see how we added some information for each scene, as well as some attributes that then we use to draw every scene. So attributes are assigned to each scene in order to characterize it. Some of these are physical location, period, emotion conveyed, camera and scene movement, or relevant elements from the urban landscape. As an example, we can consider how we have applied the attributes for a scene of the film Barrio from 1998. It was set in the periphery, but in a particular element, reflecting some kind of tension between the unbuilt and the expansion of the city. Then we drew this scene in plan, first focusing on the physical and technical aspects, like the position of the camera, its movement, and the portion of the city that it captures. And then we added the rest of qualitative invisible layers that come from the attributes we just explained. Once all these scenes are mapped following the same method, we produce this extensive cartography of the city of Madrid. By representing all these imaginaries in a digital cartography, we are able to distinguish some areas of the city that have been heavily charged with meaning through filmmaking. As it could be expected in the historical center of the city, there is a great concentration of scenes. Many of them, of course, take advantage of its historical condition and incorporate it into the film. However, we can also find a great number in the periphery of the city, forming a kind of ring that emerges around the historical center. This was a blank space whose significance arose when new citizens started to come massively from the countryside in the 40s. And filmmaking also reflected the potential during the second half of the century. Now we will focus on three sections from these outskirts where several scenes were set, creating clusters of overlapping meanings. The first of these nodes is located in the southeast, a depressed area of the city. In it, we identified two scenes taken from the same film, Deprisa, set released in 1981. The scene we have placed above shows a panoramic view of this brand new district, and it frames a skyline of the new hybrid landscape between the peri-urban and natural setting. It highlights the importance of the train, both as an infrastructure for progress and as a division tool. The bottom scene shows a more closer scale, and it places us in the everyday life of one of these neighborhoods, because we see a protest sign that vindicates how the new neighbors were claiming their place in the city. When mapping them, we see their different scope, but both reinforce the liminal landscape of this liminal, the liminal character, of this liminal landscape, still disconnected from the city. We perceive the wound inflicted by the train lanes, as well as the movement of the car, an essential element for living here. The second node is located at the northern end of the most important street that crosses the city, the Paseo de la Castellana. Here in the 1990s, a new landmark would represent a gateway to the city. Two twin leaning towers designed by the architect Philip Johnson, and above we see at the base of the two towers a quiet sentence that shows again the everyday life of a neighborhood which is being modified due to the urban renovation of this part. And in several shots, we see the new towers vaguely in the background while the scene presents this place as a scenery in which someone is being watched. In the scene below, a much more unique event is happening. It's the place where the devil is going to be born in a comedy horror film. The towers are highlighted by the images, and even one character draws the elevation of the towers in the scene. Although both scenes characterize the built environment in almost an opposite way, they use the creation of the new landmark in the city to project new meanings. That's precisely why both films take advantage of the moment of its construction. It's still almost empty of visual content. The third and final node is situated in the northeast of the city. These three scenes are set near the M30, the city's circular highway. And as you probably know, this road makes a clear boundary between the city center and the periphery. So in the scene above, from 1954, the outskirts of the city are yet to be constructed. A liminal landscape again, neither rural nor urban, in which the children's imagination and gaming as an inland activity allows them to signify a territory without an owner. The one in the middle represents a historical event in Spain, the escape of a group of terrorists who had killed the president during the Franco regime. They drive there trying to reach the Great Ring Road that will allow them to be gone. In the bottom one, a young woman in despair runs away from her lover. This emotion is reinforced both by the movement of the camera as well as by the urban landscape of fences, half-built buildings, and parked cars. It's an urban fabric designed then for vehicles. The three are remarkably different in the emotional content they project onto the area. This is also reflected in the cartographic representation of each scene. However, they all share the notion of generating meaning through the idea of movement. The upper one through the children playing like bees, and the other two through linear movement, although at different speeds. So that's part of our ongoing research and where we are now. We are starting to understand how all these images of the city may be useful today. Those representations, far from just capturing reality, help create it, recalling the statement made by Oscar Wilde that life imitates art far more than arts imitate life. And that's where I thought they were interesting for this conference, since the topic precisely is representing pasts, but also visioning futures. These representations could help understand both ancient and contemporary realities and reinforce the imagery of the city. These images may be a strong support for those who inhabit those places in terms of identity, social engagement, and belonging, as a deep link between them and as evidences of a shared everyday life. And these new maps or drawings can potentially identify areas of interest and areas of meaning, and spaces charged with those images coming from filmmaking, especially when in the same space we find several representations. It's an opportunity for us to study what's going on there and to what extent the life and the image of that space may come from one or other representation. In this way, I will include in the printed version some some of these maps and a further discussion of the whole project. I hope you find it interesting. Thank you very much for your attention.